So I'm joined by Dr. Joy Ippolito, who is a Social Impact Investment Director focusing on healthy youth development for the Institute for Corporate and Social Impact. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having time for me today.
So we wanted to talk about the article that you've posted on Medium, the blog, and kind of why it was so important for you to share the stories that you shared.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about it for several days. One of the most, I think, challenging times that this pandemic has brought forth is that there are a lot of people suffering, and they're suffering in different ways. Sometimes that's financial. Sometimes it's just feeling like you're at your wit's end because your life has been upended, and now, you have two people working in the home, and you have a bunch of kids you're trying to kind of corral and get everything done. And then it's just, I think, seeing folks, struggling with. Most of us are not used to this type of social distancing. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I think it's just that sense of trying to find new ways to feel and stay connected. Also during a time, though, that is fraught with a lot of uncertainty. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know how it's going to end. And so I think both of those things coupled together, I just saw a lot of pain and frustration. And one of the things my clinical training had often taught me, right, is we would talk about these things as a selective use of self. And so sometimes I've found it can be powerful to share our own struggles, our own journeys, as a model of how we can get through the things that we're experiencing in our daily lives, and then still pick up and keep going.
You and I have had the conversation about just how important it is to speak about mental health and to do so publicly. It just feels like at this particular time, too, the topic just can't be shunted to the side, can it?
No, I mean, when I started with the Institute just over a year ago, making mental health investments was a focus of mine. But I think now more than ever, because of the stress so many of us find ourselves in, some of us are starting to see people that we love and care about, or even just living in our communities that are affected by this pandemic. It's stressful, and it's stressful because it's not something that you can anticipate, and it's not something that you can necessarily see coming because so much of it is invisible until it really starts to attack people. And so, we can't underestimate the impact that's having, in our hearts, but also in our minds. And that's not to say that everyone's going to fall apart. I think we're going to have different times and places, but that coupled on top of all the other daily stressors that so many of us are facing, there were already individuals struggling prior to this pandemic, and this often just puts more stress on it. And even if you weren't struggling, I think there are times that folks feel somehow guilty if they're not struggling, but they feel sad or they feel bad. And it's absolutely okay. I mean, it's expected that you might be feeling some sense of negativity. And I think the only way collectively, within our families, within our communities, and as a society that we get through this is not just take care of ourselves physically, talking about social distancing, talking about washing down and, sanitizing things is important, but so is making sure that we're taking care of the thoughts and feelings that we have in our head, because our emotional and mental well-being is very much tied to our physical well-being as well. And so I think this pandemic has really highlighted, unfortunately, there's a lot of gaps in our mental health service system. I know that there are many people out there volunteering hours. They are going above and beyond. The therapists that I know, much love to them, because they're really working around the clock to kind of help take care of people's needs. But inevitably, there are a lot of folks that are still continuing to struggle. And so we need to think creatively, innovatively, how are the ways that we can all be there for each other and make sure that everyone's feeling supported during this really difficult time.
So you had talked about how you are investing in mental health space as it relates to healthy youth development. I mean, from great challenge can come great opportunity. You've talked a lot about filling gaps. I mean, what are some of the things that you're looking for as it relates in this space at this time?
Sure. So probably like halfway through last year, we had already made an investment. One of our first portfolio companies in this area is X2 AI. And I think one of the game changers for me and why I found them to just be a fascinating company is that they've figured out how to really recreate that empathy and support that you might be able to get in a therapeutic relationship, but they do it, from your phone. And so you can be texting, Tess is what her name is, and getting some of that support. And it's 24/7. And the companies that it's offered through end up offering it free to users, so it's not like you're having to pay a fee. And that doesn't replace therapists, right? So it's not to say that somehow texting, you know, an AI computer is going to all of a sudden eliminate the need for therapists. If anything, we need more of them. The problem is that we don't have enough individuals trained across this country, even on a normal day, to be able to help all the folks who are suffering or just even need someone to talk to get through some of the difficult times. And especially if you're outside of an urban area. So if you live in a large metro area, if you're here in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, or Madison, you know, there's waiting lists there. There's waiting lists even in places like Chicago, depending on the types of insurance that you have. And then when you move out to rural areas, you might not be able to access anybody. And so one of those gaps is trying to think about how do we make sure everyone has some support and some form of access, regardless of where they live. I think there's various ways to come at that problem. So it's not simply about using AI. There's also ways to be thinking about, you know, how do we help get the waiting list down? And are there ways that we can be innovative, that we can, you know, take what we've learned from other industries and be more efficient in how we are processing those wait times, how we are making sure that people are getting the best use and support out of the times that they do have face-to-face with a therapist. As well as, I think, you know, prevention. I remember very, very early in my career, one of my professors said, you know, prevention, we know long-term how much of an effect it can have, but sometimes it's difficult to invest early on because we often wait till there's a problem. If we invest more in some of those preventative efforts, if we focus more on, you know, early childhood development, if we focus more on some of the social emotional learning and mindfulness, all of those are ways in which then when we are confronted with a crisis like this, or even just confronted with difficulties, we've really built up those resiliencies and promoted competencies for young people so that they're better able to equip with that. But likewise, there's still going to be those difficult times that, you know, people need some extra support. And so just trying to think of a variety of different companies, I think, unfortunately, but potentially also fortunately, out of this time, we keep hearing people talk about forced innovation. And I think we will start to see more companies that I hope will come to the table with those really great ideas that are going to help us solve some of these really big mental health crises that we had prior to the pandemic and that we will continue to have after this pandemic ends.
Joy, thanks so much for sharing some time as well as your personal thoughts and your professional expertise. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Adam. And everyone out there, stay safe and stay healthy. We're in this together.